My name is Melissa, and I am 28 years old. When I was 15, I lost both my parents in a devastating car accident. What hurt even more than their sudden death was the betrayal that followed. My two adult brothers, Jack and Ryan, refused to take me in. Instead, they sent me to a foster home, abandoning me when I needed them most. For 10 years, I lived with that pain. Then one day, I received a call that changed everything. Let me know where you are watching from and hit that like and subscribe button as I share how life has a way of bringing things full circle. Growing up, I had what many would consider a picture-perfect family. My father was a successful civil engineer who designed bridges across 3 states. He was a quiet, thoughtful man with a dry sense of humor who loved taking us hiking on weekends. My mother taught 4th grade at the local elementary school and was beloved by her students for her creative lessons and warm personality. She baked cookies every Friday and always made our home smell like cinnamon and love. Our family was completed by my two much older brothers, Jack and Ryan. The age gap between us was significant. Jack was 12 years older than me, and Ryan was 10 years my senior. By the time I was forming clear memories, they were already teenagers with their own lives and interests. When I was 5, Jack left for college to study finance, and Ryan followed 2 years later to pursue a law degree. Despite the age difference, I idolized my brothers. During holiday breaks, when they would come home from college, I would follow them around like a devoted puppy. Jack would let me sit on his shoulders and pretend I was a giant. Ryan would read me stories, doing different voices for each character. Those memories, though sparse, were precious to me. "Squirt, one day you will be taller than all of us," Jack once told me at a family barbecue when I was 9. He had just graduated college and was starting his first job at a prestigious financial firm in Chicago. "And smarter, too," Ryan added, ruffling my hair. He was in his 2nd year of law school, then ambitious and always impeccably dressed. Our family gatherings were warm affairs filled with laughter and conversation. My parents made sure that despite the distance, we maintained our bonds. We took a family vacation each summer, usually to a national park or beach destination. I have countless photos of these trips, my brothers and I standing in front of magnificent natural wonders, all of us smiling. At school, I was a good student, taking after my mother in my love for reading and science. I had a small but loyal group of friends, and we spent our weekends riding bikes around the neighborhood or having sleepovers where we stayed up way too late talking about our dreams. "I want to be a doctor like Uncle David," I announced at dinner one night when I was 13. My mother's brother was a pediatrician, and his stories about helping children had inspired me. "You would make a wonderful doctor, Melissa," my father said, his eyes crinkling with pride. "You have a caring heart and a sharp mind." My mother nodded in agreement. "Just remember, whatever you choose to do, we will support you 100%. Meanwhile, my brothers were building their own lives. Jack was climbing the corporate ladder at his firm and had recently met Sarah, the woman he would eventually marry. Ryan had graduated from law school and joined a corporate law firm in Boston, working long hours, but enjoying the fast-paced lifestyle. When they visited, they would bring me gifts and tell me stories about the adult world that seemed so far away from my teenage existence. I remember Jack showing me how to balance a checkbook when I was 14, and Ryan explaining the basics of contract law over Thanksgiving dinner. "Pay attention, Squirt," Jack said. "Financial literacy is something they do not teach you in school, but you will need it for life." Those moments of connection, though brief, reinforced my belief that despite the distance, we were still a close family. That my brothers, though living their own lives, still cared deeply about me. The last normal day of my life was a Friday in April. My parents were celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary that weekend and had planned a special dinner at the restaurant where they had their first date. "We will be back by 11, my mother said, kissing the top of my head as she put on her pearl earrings. She looked beautiful in a navy blue dress that made her eyes shine. My father adjusted his tie in the mirror. "There are leftovers in the fridge if you get hungry, and Mrs. Jenkins next door said to call if you need anything." "I will be fine," I assured them, already settling on the couch with a bowl of popcorn and the TV remote. "Have fun. You deserve it." My mother paused at the door, looking back at me with a smile. "We love you, sweetheart." "Love you too," I replied casually, not knowing these would be the last words we would exchange. I fell asleep on the couch watching a movie. The ringing phone woke me at 2 in the morning. I remember feeling disoriented, a sense of dread washing over me before I even picked up the receiver. Something felt wrong. The house was too quiet. My parents should have been home hours ago. Looking back, I realized that moment was the invisible line between my old life and what was to come. The last moment of innocence before everything changed. I had no idea then that in less than 24 hours, I would become an orphan, and shortly after a child abandoned not just by death, but by choice. The shrill ring of the phone pierced through the quiet house at 2:17 in the morning. I stumbled to answer it, my heart racing with unexplainable dread. "Hello?" I mumbled, my voice thick with sleep. "Is this the Walker residence?" a formal male voice asked. "Yes," I replied, suddenly wide awake. "This is Melissa Walker." "Miss Walker, this is Officer Daniels with the County Police Department. I am afraid there has been an accident involving your parents." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My fingers tightened around the phone as the officer explained that my parents' car had been hit by a drunk driver on their way home. They had been rushed to Memorial Hospital in critical condition. "I need to go there," I said, panic rising in my chest. "I need to see them." "Is there an adult who can bring you?" the officer asked. With shaking hands, I called Mrs. Jenkins next door. Within minutes, the kind elderly woman was driving me to the hospital, her weathered hand squeezing mine reassuringly, even as her own eyes filled with tears. The hospital was a blur of harsh fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. A social worker met us in the waiting room, her face solemn. I knew before she spoke. "Your parents sustained severe injuries," she said gently. "The doctors did everything they could, but they both passed away. Your father died at the scene, and your mother about 20 minutes ago in surgery." The words hit me like physical blows. I remember making a sound that did not seem human, a wail of pure anguish that rose from somewhere deep inside me. Mrs. Jenkins wrapped her arms around me as my legs gave way. I could not breathe, could not think. In a single moment, my entire world had collapsed. The next few days passed in a fog of grief. The social worker helped me contact my brothers. Jack flew in from Chicago the next day, and Ryan arrived from Boston that evening. I ran to them at the airport, desperate for the comfort of family, but their embraces felt stiff, awkward. "I am so sorry, Melissa," Jack said, his face drawn and pale. Ryan nodded, putting a hand on my shoulder. "We will get through this." But something in their expressions made my stomach knot with unease. They exchanged glances when they thought I was not looking, had whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. The funeral was held 3 days after the accident. I sat between my brothers in the front row of the church, numb with grief as friends and colleagues paid tribute to my parents. Jack spoke briefly about our father's dedication to family, and Ryan read a poem my mother had loved. I could not bring myself to speak, fear that opening my mouth would release a scream that might never end. After the service, our house filled with well-meaning neighbors bearing casseroles and condolences. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, accepting hugs from people whose faces blurred together. When the last visitor finally left, Jack called for a family meeting in the living room. "We need to discuss what happens next," he said, sitting across from me. Ryan took a seat beside him, leaving me alone on the couch my parents used to share. "I will stay here in the house," I said immediately. "I can take care of myself. I am 15, not 5. Jack cleared his throat. "That is not possible, Melissa. You are a minor. You need a legal guardian." "Then one of you can be my guardian," I said, looking between them. "You can move back home." The silence that followed was deafening. Jack and Ryan exchanged another of those looks that made my heart race with anxiety. "The thing is," Jack finally said, "Sarah and I just got married. We are trying to start a family of our own. My job requires long hours and frequent travel. And I just made junior partner," Ryan added quickly. "I am barely home as it is. My apartment is tiny and my lifestyle is not conducive to raising a teenager." I stared at them in disbelief. "What are you saying?" Jack leaned forward, his expression a practiced mask of compassion that did not reach his eyes. "We have discussed it, and we think the best option is for you to enter the state foster care system." The words did not make sense at first. Foster care. That was for children without families. I had a family. I had 2 brothers sitting right in front of me. "You cannot be serious," I whispered. "You are my brothers. You are my family." "We will always be your family," Ryan said, though he would not meet my eyes. "But we are not in positions to raise a teenager." "I do not need raising," I cried, jumping to my feet. "I just need a place to live until I graduate. I can cook and clean and take care of myself. Please, you cannot do this." But my pleas fell on deaf ears. They had already made up their minds before they even arrived. I learned later that they had called social services on the way from the airport, inquiring about the process. Through tears, I listened as they explained the financial arrangements. The house would be sold, and along with my parents' life insurance, the money would be placed in a trust fund that I could access when I turned 18. Until then, I would live in a foster home. "We will visit often," Jack promised, "and call all the time." "You will be well taken care of," Ryan added. The social worker assured us they have excellent facilities. Facilities. Like I was an object to be stored until adulthood. That night I cried until I had no tears left. I lay in my bed surrounded by the possessions and memories of my life, knowing I would soon have to leave most of it behind. The betrayal cut deeper than the grief. My brothers, whom I had idolized, had chosen their convenience over my well-being. They were abandoning me just when I needed them most. A week after the funeral, a social worker named Ms. Thompson came to take me to Evergreen Youth Center, a foster facility 30 miles away. Jack and Ryan helped to load my suitcases into her car, making hollow promises about visiting soon. As the car pulled away from the only home I had ever known, I watched my brothers grow smaller in the rearview mirror. They stood side by side in the driveway, their postures already relaxed, as if relieved of a burden. Neither of them waved goodbye. Evergreen Youth Center loomed large and institutional, a brick building surrounded by a chain-link fence that made it look more like a detention center than a home for displaced children. Ms. Thompson led me through double doors into a sterile lobby with motivational posters peeling from the walls. "This is just temporary," she assured me, though her voice lacked conviction. "Until we find a placement with a foster family." A middle-aged woman with frizzy gray hair and tired eyes greeted us at the front desk. "You must be Melissa. I am Mrs. Winters, the facility director. Welcome to Evergreen." Welcome, as if I had chosen to be there. The tour of the facility did nothing to lift my spirits. The dormitory-style rooms housed 4 girls each with metal bunk beds and small lockers for personal belongings. The communal bathrooms offered no privacy, just shower stalls with thin plastic curtains. The cafeteria served meals at strictly regulated times, and the recreation room contained a few worn board games and an ancient television. "You will be in room 12, Mrs. Winters informed me, leading me down a hallway with scuffed linoleum floors. "Your roommates are Jasmine, Tara, and Sophia." 3 girls looked up as I entered the room. Jasmine, a tall African-American girl with elaborate braids, offered a small smile. Tara, pale with a pierced eyebrow, barely acknowledged my presence. Sophia, tiny with nervous eyes, whispered a quiet hello. "Dinner is at 6, Mrs. Winters said, depositing my suitcases beside an empty lower bunk. "Lights out at 9:30. Then she was gone, leaving me alone with 3 strangers in what was now supposed to be my home. "First day is the worst," Jasmine said, watching me stare at my suitcases. "It gets easier." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. I unpacked mechanically, placing my clothes in the assigned locker, setting a framed photo of my parents on the small bedside shelf. When I pulled out my laptop, Tara snorted. "Better hide that," she advised. "Things go missing around here." That first night in the center, lying on an unfamiliar bed with the sounds of 30 other girls breathing, whispering, and occasionally crying around me, was the loneliest of my life. I curled into a tight ball beneath the thin blanket, pressing my face into the pillow to muffle my sobs. The next morning brought my first day at a new school. Evergreen residents attended the local public school, arriving in a van that marked us immediately as those foster kids. The stigma was instant and isolating. "Which one of your parents is the druggie?" a girl asked me in the bathroom on my first day. "Neither," I replied, shocked. "They died in a car accident." She looked suspicious, as if I were lying to sound more sympathetic. "Whatever. At least you got a good reason. Most of these foster freaks are here because nobody wants them. Nobody wants them. The words echoed in my mind too close to my own reality for comfort. My own brothers had not wanted me. In class, I sat silently trying to focus on the lessons despite the whispering and occasional snickers when the teacher called on the new girl. My previous school had been challenging and supportive with teachers who knew me and my academic potential. Here I was, just another foster kid passing through, not worth the investment of attention or encouragement. The days fell into a monotonous routine. Wake at 6:30, breakfast at 7, school from 8 to 3, mandatory study hall from 4 to 5, dinner at 6, recreation time until 8:30, then preparation for lights out. The structure might have been comforting in its predictability, if not for the constant underlying tension of living with dozens of traumatized children, all competing for limited resources and attention. A month after my arrival, I met Amanda, a volunteer mentor who visited the center twice a week. In her early 30s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, she ran an art therapy program for the residents. "You do not have to talk about your feelings if you do not want to," she told me during our first session. "Just put them into your art." I had never been particularly artistic, but under Amanda's guidance, I found release in smearing paint across canvas and molding clay with my hands. She never pushed me to explain my creations, but she was always there, a steady presence in a world that had become wildly unpredictable. "You have brothers, right?" she asked one day, several months into our sessions. "Do they visit?" The question stung. Jack had visited twice in the first month, bringing a care package of books and snacks. Ryan had come once, awkwardly sitting across from me in the visitation room, checking his watch every few minutes. Their calls had grown less frequent, from weekly to monthly to holidays and birthdays only. "Not really," I admitted. "They are busy with their lives." Amanda's expression darkened, but she simply nodded. "Their loss." I clung to those words in the months that followed, especially after Jack called to say he and Sarah were expecting their first child. He sounded excited, distracted, mentioning almost as an afterthought that they would be moving to a bigger house in the suburbs. "Great timing, right?" he said. "We will have the nursery ready just in time." I wanted to scream. He had a spare bedroom for his unborn child, but none for his orphaned sister. Ryan's calls became increasingly brief and formal. He had taken on a high-profile case, he explained. The hours were brutal, but the career advancement opportunities tremendous. He promised to visit when things settle down, a time that never seemed to arrive. I tried reaching out to them, leaving voicemails and sending emails describing my life at Evergreen, my struggles at school, my loneliness. The responses, when they came at all, were cursory. "Hang in there. Focus on your studies. Things will get better." As my 16th birthday approached, I held on to the hope that they would make an effort for the milestone. Perhaps they would take me out for the day, or even reconsider their decision. Instead, I received a card from Jack with a $50 gift card and a brief call from Ryan between court sessions. That night, I tore up the photos of my brothers that I had kept beside my bed. Amanda found me the next day, eyes swollen from crying, and sat with me in silence until I was ready to talk. "They do not care about me," I said finally. "I am an inconvenience they dealt with so they could get on with their perfect lives." "Then build a life that does not include them," Amanda replied, her voice gentle but firm. "Focus on you, Melissa, on what you can control." Taking her advice, I threw myself into my schoolwork with renewed determination. If my brothers believed I would fail without their support, I would prove them wrong. I stayed late in the school library, joined study groups, raised my hand in class. Gradually, my grades improved, and with them, the way teachers and even some classmates perceived me. In the center, I found unexpected allies. Jasmine, my roommate, taught me how to negotiate the complex social hierarchy of the facility. Sophia, though quiet, shared her precious collection of novels with me. Even Tara, initially standoffish, became protective in her own gruff way, especially when newer, younger residents arrived. I learned to cook in the center's small teaching kitchen, to manage my limited allowance to wash my clothes without turning everything pink. I developed a routine for using the bathroom during less crowded times, for finding quiet corners to read and study. In small ways, I was building the self-sufficiency that would one day allow me to leave Evergreen behind. But still, in quiet moments before sleep, the pain would resurface. On holidays, watching other residents leave for home visits with extended family. During parent-teacher conferences, sitting alone while a staff member hurriedly met with each of my teachers. On the anniversary of my parents' death, when the only acknowledgement from my brothers was a text message from Jack saying simply, "Thinking of you today." The anger hardened into something cold and immovable within me. I stopped calling them, stopped checking if they had emailed or messaged. I tucked away my grief and betrayal, focusing instead on survival, and eventually escape through education. If there was one thing I had learned at Evergreen, it was that in the end, I could rely only on myself. By the time I turned 18, I had transformed from the frightened, grief-stricken girl who arrived at Evergreen into someone almost unrecognizable. 3 years in the foster system had hardened me in some ways and strengthened me in others. I graduated high school with honors, earning a substantial scholarship to State University, where I planned to pursue pre-med studies. The day I left Evergreen was bittersweet. I had grown to hate the place, but also to rely on its predictable routines. The staff and other long-term residents had become a kind of makeshift family, dysfunctional, but familiar. "You are going to do amazing things," Amanda told me during our final mentoring session. She had continued visiting the center throughout my time there, becoming the one consistent adult presence in my life. "Just remember, your past shapes you, but it does not define you." With my trust fund from my parents' estate, I had enough to cover what my scholarship did not, plus a small apartment near campus. After years of shared rooms and communal spaces, having my own place felt like an unimaginable luxury. Moving day was a stark reminder of how alone I truly was. While other freshmen arrived with parents helping carry boxes and set up dorm rooms, I unloaded my single suitcase and backpack alone. The social worker who had driven me from Evergreen left with a brief handshake and wishes for good luck. I stood in the empty apartment surrounded by bare walls and standard-issue furniture and allowed myself one moment of self-pity. Then I squared my shoulders and got to work making lists of essentials to buy, planning my budget, mapping the route to my classes. My first year of college was a whirlwind of adjustment. The academic demands were intense, especially for someone determined to maintain a perfect GPA for medical school applications. I found a part-time job at the university library that fit around my class schedule, providing extra income and a quiet place to study during slow shifts. My roommate Hannah was a journalism major with a loud laugh and an irrepressible curiosity about everything and everyone. At first, her questions about my family made me withdraw, giving vague answers about parents who had passed away. But her genuine interest and lack of judgment eventually broke down my defenses. One night, after a particularly grueling midterm period, we sat on the floor of our apartment sharing a pizza and cheap wine. Hannah was talking about her weekend plans to visit her parents when she noticed my expression. "I am sorry," she said, wincing. "I know talking about family is hard for you." Perhaps it was the wine or the exhaustion, or simply the years of holding everything inside. But suddenly I was telling her everything. About the accident, my brother's betrayal, the years at Evergreen. Hannah listened without interruption, only reaching for my hand when my voice broke. "Those absolute jerks," she said when I finished, her journalistic objectivity abandoned in favor of righteous indignation on my behalf. "Have you spoken to them recently?" I shook my head. "Jack sends a card at Christmas with a photo of his kids. Ryan emails on my birthday. I do not respond anymore." Hannah's friendship became a lifeline during those early college years. She insisted on including me in holidays with her boisterous family when I would have otherwise spent them alone in our apartment. She proofread my papers, quizzed me on anatomy terms, and dragged me to social events when I would have preferred to stay in and study. "All work and no play makes Melissa a burned-out pre-med," she would say, pulling me away from my textbooks. Through Hannah, I made other friends. Slowly, cautiously, I built connections. I joined a study group for organic chemistry, volunteered at the campus health center, even went on a few dates, though I kept potential romantic partners at a safe emotional distance. Meanwhile, I gleaned bits of information about my brothers' lives through social media and mutual acquaintances. Jack now had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and had been promoted to vice president at his firm. Ryan had moved to a larger law firm and was becoming known for his work in corporate mergers. They appeared to be living the successful, comfortable lives they had prioritized over caring for their orphaned sister. Sometimes late at night, I would scroll through their profiles, studying photos of holiday gatherings and family vacations. Jack's children were growing up without knowing their aunt. Ryan had apparently bought a vacation home in Maine. Their lives moved forward apparently unburdened by guilt or regret. On rare occasions, one of them would reach out with greater effort than usual. When I made the dean's list my sophomore year, and the achievement was published in the university paper, Ryan sent an email saying he was proud of me. When I turned 21, Jack called and left a voicemail suggesting we meet for dinner next time he was in town for business. I deleted the email. I did not return the call. By my senior year of college, I had been accepted to the university's medical school, a remarkable achievement that I celebrated quietly with Hannah and a few close friends. I did not share the news with my brothers, though I imagined their reactions if I did. Would they try to take credit for my success, suggesting their abandonment had somehow made me stronger, more independent? The thought made my stomach turn. When I walked across the stage at graduation summa cum laude with a degree in biology, I scanned the audience out of habit, knowing I would see no familiar faces there, except for Hannah and her parents, who had unofficially adopted me into their family. After the ceremony, as we posed for photos, Hannah's mother squeezed my shoulder. "Your parents would be so proud of you, dear," she said kindly. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. My parents would have been proud, but I also knew they would have been devastated by what their sons had done by the family that had fractured beyond repair after their deaths. That summer before starting medical school, I did something I had been putting off for years. I drove to the cemetery where my parents were buried the first time I had visited since the funeral. Standing before their shared headstone, I told them everything. My fear and grief at Evergreen, my determination in college, my acceptance to medical school. I told them about Hannah and her family, about Amanda, who had kept in touch all these years, about the life I was building on my own. I did not tell them about the hole that remained in my heart, the space where family should have been. I did not want them to know how completely their sons had failed them and me. As I drove away from the cemetery, I made a decision. The past was behind me. I would focus only on the future, on becoming Dr. Melissa Walker, on building a career helping others. I would create a life so full and meaningful that the absence of my brothers would be nothing more than a footnote in my story. Little did I know that life had other plans and that the chapter I thought was firmly closed was about to be reopened in the most unexpected way. I was 25 years old and in the second year of my medical residency when the call came. It was a Tuesday evening in November, and I had just finished a brutal 36-hour shift in the emergency department. My apartment was dark and quiet as I collapsed onto my couch, too exhausted even to change out of my scrubs. When my phone rang, I almost did not answer it. Unknown numbers usually meant spam calls or wrong numbers, but some instinct made me pick up. "Hello," I said, stifling a yawn. "Melissa, it is Jack, your brother." The sound of his voice, so unexpected after all these years, sent a jolt through me. I sat upright, suddenly wide awake. "Jack," I said flatly, not a question or a greeting, just an acknowledgement. "I know it has been a long time," he said, his voice sounding strained and unfamiliar. "How are you?" The banality of the question after 10 years of minimal contact almost made me laugh. "What do you want, Jack? It is nearly midnight and I just worked a double shift." There was a pause, then a deep sigh. "I need help, Melissa. Everything has fallen apart." Despite myself, I felt a flicker of curiosity. The last I had heard through our distant connections, Jack was living the perfect suburban life with his perfect family and his perfect career. "What happened?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Sarah left me 6 months ago," he said. "Took the kids to her parents in Florida. Then last month the firm downsized and I lost my job. I have been living on savings, but—" His voice cracked. "I just got diagnosed with early-stage lymphoma. The treatments are going to be expensive, and without my job, I lost my health insurance." The information came in a rush, each revelation more shocking than the last. I sat in silence, processing what he was telling me. "I hate to ask this," Jack continued into the silence, "but I need somewhere to stay while I undergo treatment. And maybe some help navigating the medical system. You are a doctor now, right? I saw on LinkedIn." "Of course." After years of silence, he had finally bothered to look me up because he needed something from me. The irony was almost too perfect. My brother, who had refused to take me in when I was a grieving teenager, was now asking me for shelter. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice cold. "You abandoned me to the foster system when I was 15 because taking care of me would have been inconvenient for your life plans. And now that your life has fallen apart, you want me to take care of you." "Melissa, please," Jack said, his voice breaking. "I know I do not deserve your help. What Ryan and I did was terrible. I have regretted it every day, but I have nowhere else to go. Ryan will not even take my calls anymore." That surprised me. The brothers who had presented a united front against me had apparently had their own falling out. "Where are you now?" I asked. "At a motel about 20 miles from you," he admitted. "I found your address through an online directory. I was hoping maybe we could meet for coffee tomorrow, talk things through." I should have said no. Every instinct honed by years of self-protection screamed at me to hang up, to block his number, to preserve the life I had carefully built without him. But beneath the anger and resentment, there was something else. Curiosity, perhaps. Or something deeper and more complicated. "There is a cafe called Magnolia on 3rd Street, I said finally. "I can meet you there at noon. I have to be back at the hospital by 2. The relief in his voice was palpable. "Thank you, Melissa. I will be there." After hanging up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, emotions warring within me. Part of me wanted to call Hannah, now working as a reporter in Washington, D.C., to ask for her advice. But I knew what she would say. She had witnessed firsthand the aftermath of my abandonment, had held me through nightmares and panic attacks during our college years. Instead, I called Amanda, who had remained a mentor and friend long after my time at Evergreen. "You do not owe him anything," she said after I explained the situation. "You know that, right?" "I know," I replied. "But I cannot help thinking about what my parents would want me to do." Amanda was quiet for a moment. "Your parents would want you to do what is best for you, Melissa, not for Jack. Figure out what that is, and then decide." I barely slept that night, my mind cycling through a decade of memories, grievances, and unanswered questions. By morning, I had not reached any clear decision about how to handle the meeting with Jack, but I knew I needed answers before I could move forward. Magnolia Cafe was busy with the lunch crowd when I arrived precisely at noon. I spotted Jack immediately, though I might not have recognized him if I had passed him on the street. The handsome, confident older brother of my youth had been replaced by a gaunt, haunted-looking man with premature gray in his hair and dark circles under his eyes. He stood when he saw me, his expression a mixture of hope and trepidation. I approached the table and sat down without offering a hug or handshake. "You look well, Melissa," he said, eyes scanning my face. "I saw online that you finished medical school. Congratulations." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my voice even. "You look unwell." He winced, then attempted a smile. "Always direct. You got that from Dad." The casual reference to our father, as if we shared warm family memories instead of a decade of estrangement, ignited a spark of anger within me. "Let us get something straight," I said, leaning forward. "I did not come here to reminisce about the good old days or pretend we are a normal family catching up. I came because I want answers. Real ones, not the excuses you and Ryan gave me when you shipped me off to Evergreen." Jack nodded, his shoulders slumping. "That is fair. What do you want to know?" "Why?" The question that had haunted me for 10 years. Why did you really abandon me? Was I that much of a burden that neither of you could make room in your lives? Jack stared down at his coffee cup for a long moment. "The easy answer is that we were selfish," he said finally. "We had built our lives separate from the family, and neither of us wanted to change course." He looked up, meeting my eyes. "But the truth is more complicated. We were scared, Melissa. Neither of us had any idea how to raise a teenager. Ryan and I barely knew how to take care of ourselves." "You did not have to raise me," I countered. "I just needed a home, family." "I know that now," Jack said. "But at the time, all I could think about was how unprepared I was. Sarah and I were newlyweds." She never said it outright, but I could tell she did not want to start our marriage with an instant family. "And Ryan," he shook his head. "Ryan was living the bachelor life. His apartment was basically just a place to sleep between work and parties. So you decided a foster home was better for me than either of your imperfect situations. Jack flinched. We told ourselves it would be temporary, that we would find a better solution. But then time passed and it became easier to let things stay as they were, to convince ourselves you were doing fine without us. Was I? I asked sharply. Did you ever really check? Did you know I was bullied at school for being a foster kid? That I cried myself to sleep for months? That I had to learn to defend myself against other girls who would steal my things? Did you know any of that? Jack's face crumpled. No, he whispered. When we visited, you always seemed okay. And the social workers said you were adjusting well. Because I stopped showing you the truth, I said. What was the point? You had made your choice. Neither of you were going to change your minds and take me home. We sat in heavy silence, the cafe noise around us, a stark contrast to the gravity of our conversation. I cannot change what happened, Jack said finally. I wish I could, but I am asking for your help now because I have nowhere else to turn. Ryan and I had a falling out years ago over business matters. My friends have their own families and problems. Sarah has primary custody of the kids. And you think I should care about your problems because we share DNA? I asked. You forfeited the right to family loyalty when you decided I was not worth the inconvenience. Jack's eyes filled with tears. I know, he said, his voice breaking. You have every right to turn me away. But I am asking anyway. Not just for a place to stay, but for a chance to make amends. To try to be the brother I should have been 10 years ago. I studied his face, searching for sincerity or manipulation. The doctor in me noted the signs of illness and stress. The abandoned sister in me remembered the pain of rejection. The adult I had become weighed both against the moral compass my parents had instilled in me before their deaths. I will think about it, I said, finally standing to leave. I need to get back to the hospital. Give me your number and I will call you when I have made a decision. As I walked away, I could feel his eyes on my back filled with the desperate hope of a man who had lost everything and was reaching for the most unlikely of lifelines. A sister he had discarded when she needed him most. The irony was not lost on me. Life had indeed come full circle. During my shift at the hospital that afternoon, I could not stop thinking about Jack and his request. The fact that he would come to me of all people for help spoke to how desperate his situation truly was. Part of me, the wounded child who still lived somewhere within my heart, wanted to refuse him outright to let him experience even a fraction of the abandonment I had felt. But another part, the physician trained to heal and help, recognize the genuine fear in his eyes when he spoke of his diagnosis. Early-stage lymphoma was often treatable, but the process was grueling, expensive, and nearly impossible to navigate alone. After my shift ended, I called Hannah for the perspective of someone who knew the full story of my past. Are you kidding me? She exclaimed when I explained Jack's request. The audacity of that man to show up after all these years and ask for your help. Tell him to pound sand, Mel. I know, I sighed. But he is sick, Hannah, and he has nowhere else to go. So, where were they when you had nowhere else to go? You were a child, Mel. A traumatized child who had just lost her parents. They were adults with resources and options. She was right, of course. But something still nagged at me. What about Ryan? Hannah asked after a moment. Is he suddenly going to show up on your doorstep too? According to Jack, they had some kind of falling out years ago. They are not speaking. Karma, Hannah muttered. Look, whatever you decide, I will support you. But please do not let them hurt you again. You have worked too hard to build your life. After hanging up with Hannah, I called Dr. Patel, an oncologist I had worked with during my rotations. Without mentioning my personal connection, I asked about treatment options for someone in Jack's situation. Without insurance, it would be catastrophic financially, she confirmed. There are assistance programs, but the paperwork is overwhelming and the waiting lists can be long. Having a medical advocate makes a significant difference in outcomes. By the time I arrived home that evening, I had made my decision. I called Jack and laid out my terms. You can stay in my spare bedroom while you undergo treatment, I said. I will help you navigate the medical system and the financial assistance options. But I am not doing this out of sisterly love or forgiveness. I am doing it because it is the right thing to do, and because our parents would have expected it of me." Jack's relief was audible. "Thank you, Melissa. I do not deserve your help, but I am grateful for it." "There are conditions," I continued. "This is a temporary arrangement until you have completed treatment and are stable enough to support yourself. You will contribute to household expenses as you are able. You will respect my space and privacy. And most importantly, you will be completely honest with me about everything. No more convenient lies or half-truths." "I understand," he said. "I promise I will not make you regret this." Jack moved in the following weekend, bringing only 2 suitcases of belongings. The rest of his possessions, he explained, were in storage after he had been forced to sell his house when the mortgage payments became unmanageable. Living with the brother who had abandoned me was surreal and uncomfortable at first. We moved around each other cautiously, like wary animals sharing territory. I worked long hours at the hospital, partly by choice and partly by necessity as a resident. Jack spent his days on the phone with insurance companies, unemployment offices, and his ex-wife trying to rebuild some semblance of stability. I helped him find an oncologist through the University Medical Center, where there were more options for financial assistance. His first chemotherapy session was scheduled for the following week. Would you mind coming with me?" he asked hesitantly as we ate takeout at my small kitchen table. "Just for the first session. I am a little nervous." I studied him over my container of pad thai. Part of me wanted to remind him that I had faced much scarier things alone at a much younger age, but the doctor in me knew that cancer treatment was frightening for anyone. "I will see if I can adjust my schedule," I said non-committally. That night, I found myself unable to sleep, thinking about the strange turn my life had taken. Was I being too soft, too forgiving? Or was I setting appropriate boundaries while still doing the compassionate thing? I had no roadmap for this situation. The next day, I received an unexpected email from Ryan. The subject line read simply, "Jack." "Melissa," the email began. "I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Jack is staying with you during his treatment. While I admire your compassion, I feel obligated to warn you that Jack has burned many bridges in recent years. His divorce and job loss were not simply bad luck, but the consequences of poor choices. Please be careful about how much you invest in helping him. He has a pattern of taking advantage of people's goodwill. I would be happy to discuss this further if you wish to call me." The email was signed with Ryan's name and his law firm contact information as formal as a business communication. My first instinct was to ignore it entirely. Who was Ryan to offer warnings about Jack when he had been equally complicit in abandoning me? But curiosity got the better of me. I called the office number listed in his signature. "Ryan Walker speaking," came the crisp, professional voice I barely recognized. "It is Melissa," I said. "I got your email about Jack." There was a moment of silence. "Melissa, thank you for calling. How are you?" "Let us skip the pleasantries," I replied. "What exactly are you trying to do with that email? Turn me against the brother who abandoned me by warning me that the other brother who abandoned me might take advantage of my kindness?" Ryan cleared his throat. "I can see why you would view it that way. But my concern is genuine. Jack has been making increasingly poor decisions for years. His marriage ended because he had an affair with a colleague. He was fired not because of downsizing, but because of ethical violations regarding client accounts. This was news to me. Jack had painted his divorce and job loss as unfortunate circumstances beyond his control. "And what about his cancer?" I asked. "Is that also a consequence of poor choices?" "No, of course not," Ryan said quickly. "And I am truly sorry about his diagnosis. But I would hate to see you get pulled into his chaos when you have worked so hard to build your own life. I have followed your career from afar, Melissa. Medical school, your residency. You have accomplished incredible things." "No thanks to you," I said sharply. Ryan was quiet for a moment. "You are right," he said finally. "I failed you. We both did. There is no excuse that can justify what we did." The frank admission caught me off guard. I had expected deflection, or the same weak justifications Jack had initially offered. "Then why are you reaching out now?" I asked. You have had 10 years to acknowledge that you failed me. Honestly, shame, Ryan replied. The longer it went on, the harder it became to face what we had done. It was easier to tell myself you were better off without us, that you had moved on. But seeing that you would take Jack in despite everything, it made me realize how much better you are than either of us ever were. I did not know how to respond to that. The conversation had veered into territory I had not anticipated. I should go, I said finally. I have an early shift tomorrow. Wait, Ryan said quickly. Would it be possible for us to meet? There are things I should say to you in person, things I have wanted to say for years. I considered refusing, but something in his voice gave me pause. Unlike Jack, Ryan was not asking for help or accommodation. He was asking for a chance to speak. Fine, I said. I am free Sunday afternoon. There is a park near the hospital where I work. I can meet you there at 2. After hanging up, I sat for a long time staring at my phone. In the span of a week, both of my long-estranged brothers had re-entered my life, each bringing their own complicated baggage. Was this some cosmic test of my capacity for forgiveness, or simply the random chaos of life bringing past and present into unexpected collision? When I returned home that evening, I found Jack asleep on the couch, an open photo album on his lap. Curious, I gently lifted it to see what he had been looking at. It was our old family album pictures of holidays and vacations from before our parents died. I was surprised he had kept it all these years. As I looked at the smiling faces of our parents, of Jack and Ryan, as young men of myself as a child, I felt a complicated swirl of emotions. Grief for what was lost, anger for what came after, and something else, something I was not quite ready to name. Jack stirred and opened his eyes. Hey, he said sleepily. Sorry, I must have dozed off. Ryan contacted me, I said without preamble. He had quite a different version of your divorce and job loss. Jack's face fell. He told you I cheated on Sarah, that I was fired for ethical violations. Is it true? Jack sat up, running a hand through his thinning hair. Yes, he admitted. But it is not the whole truth. I made mistakes, terrible ones. After Dad and Mom died, something in me broke Melissa. I started living like each day might be my last, making reckless choices, taking shortcuts. The guilt of what we did to you. I think I was punishing myself in some twisted way, sabotaging my own happiness because I did not believe I deserved it. That is a convenient narrative, I said coolly. Poor Jack, so tormented by guilt that he had to cheat on his wife and defraud his clients. I know how it sounds, he said, his voice tight with emotion. I am not asking you to excuse what I did. I just want you to understand that I have been paying for my choices for years, long before the cancer diagnosis. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time saw past my own pain to the broken person before me. Jack had made terrible choices, not just with me, but throughout his adult life, and now he was facing the consequences on multiple fronts. I am meeting Ryan on Sunday, I told him. He wants to talk. Jack nodded slowly. Will you tell him I am sorry for everything? We have not spoken in 3 years. You can tell him yourself, I replied. If you both want to rebuild your relationship, that is between you, but I am not your messenger. As I turned to go to my room, Jack called after me softly. Melissa, thank you, not just for letting me stay here, but for being the kind of person who could. Mom and Dad would have been so proud of the woman you have become. I paused in the doorway, not turning around. Good night, Jack. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the tangled web of pain, regret, and unspoken words that connected me to my brothers. For 10 years, I had defined myself in opposition to them, determined to succeed despite their abandonment. Now, faced with their broken humanity, I was being forced to reconsider the narrative I had built around my life. Was there a path forward that honored my own journey while allowing for the possibility, however faint, of reconciliation? I did not know the answer, but I knew that Sunday's meeting with Ryan would be another piece of the puzzle. Sunday dawned clear and cool, a perfect autumn day, with leaves crunching underfoot as I walked through the park toward the agreed meeting spot. I spotted Ryan instantly sitting on a bench near the duck pond, looking every inch the successful attorney in his tailored coat and polished shoes. He stood as I approached, his expression a mixture of nerves and determination. "Melissa, thank you for coming." We sat side by side on the bench, an awkward foot of space between us. Ryan looked older than his 37 years, with streaks of premature gray at his temples and fine lines around his eyes that spoke of stress rather than laughter. "How is Jack doing?" he asked after a moment of silence. "As well as can be expected," I replied. "His first chemotherapy session is tomorrow. I am going with him." Ryan nodded. "That is kind of you, given everything." "I am a doctor. It is what I do." "It is more than that," Ryan said quietly. "It is who you are. You have always been the best of us, even as a kid." I turned to look at him directly. "I did not come here for flattery, Ryan. You said you had things to say to me, so say them." Ryan took a deep breath. "You are right. I owe you the unvarnished truth." He looked out across the pond, gathering his thoughts. "What we did to you was unforgivable. There is no justification that makes it okay. We were selfish, cowardly, and cruel." "Yes, you were," I agreed, my voice steady. "At the time, I told myself it was for the best, that you would be better off with people who knew how to raise a teenager, that Jack and I would mess you up worse than the system would." He shook his head. "But those were excuses. The truth is, I was building my career dating different women every week, living exactly as I wanted. Taking you in would have meant sacrifice responsibility. I was not willing to give up my freedom." His candor was unexpected and disarming. Unlike Jack's emotional appeals, Ryan's clinical self-assessment felt more authentic, more in keeping with the analytical brother I remembered. "Do you know what the hardest part was?" I asked. "Not the foster home itself, though that was terrible. It was knowing that I had family out there who did not want me. Do you have any idea what that does to a 15-year-old girl who just lost her parents?" Ryan's composure cracked slightly. "I try not to think about it," he admitted. "Because when I do, I hate myself for what we did." "I needed you." I continued the words I had rehearsed in my mind for years, finally finding voice. "I needed my brothers. I was grieving and scared and alone, and you both chose your convenience over my well-being." "We did," Ryan agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "And I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I am not even sure I would forgive me if I were in your position." "Then why are we here, Ryan? What do you want from me?" He turned to face me fully, his eyes red-rimmed but clear. "Nothing. I want nothing from you, Melissa. I just want you to know that not a day has gone by that I have not regretted what we did. That I have followed your achievements from afar, with a pride I have no right to feel. That when I heard you had taken Jack in despite everything, it showed me what true strength and character look like." I studied him, searching for the manipulation or self-serving agenda in his words. But all I saw was a man confronting his worst actions, laying them bare without expectation of absolution. "What happened between you and Jack?" I asked. "He said you have not spoken in 3 years." Ryan's expression hardened slightly. "Jack started making increasingly risky financial decisions, both personally and professionally. When his firm began investigating him, he asked me to help him cover his tracks. I refused and suggested he come clean instead. He did not take it well. And now, knowing he is sick, does that change anything?" Ryan was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know," he said finally. "Part of me wants to help him, to be there for him. Another part still feels betrayed by what he asked me to do. It is complicated." "Welcome to family," I said dryly. The corner of Ryan's mouth twitched in a small, sad smile. "You sound like Mom when you say things like that." The mention of our mother sent an unexpected pang through my chest. "Do I?" Ryan nodded. "She had that same way of cutting through the nonsense with just a few words." We sat in silence for a while, watching a family feed the ducks, a father lifting his small daughter so she could see better. The simple scene of family connection felt poignant against the backdrop of our conversation. "I have been thinking about having Jack move in with me after his treatment," Ryan said suddenly. "My place is bigger than yours, and I could work from home some days to help out. If..." If you think that would be good for him. The offer surprised me. Why would you do that? You just said you have not spoken in years. Ryan looked down at his hands. Because it is what our parents would have wanted, and because maybe it is time I started taking responsibility for family even if it is 10 years too late. I considered his words, turning them over in my mind. Jack has his first chemo session tomorrow at 10. University Medical Center Oncology Department. If you want to be there. Ryan looked up, surprise and hope mingling in his expression. Do you think he would want me there? I think he is scared and alone, I replied honestly. And I think that despite everything, he is still your brother. As we prepared to leave, Ryan hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small worn envelope. I have carried this with me for years, he said, handing it to me. I wrote it after your high school graduation. I saw the announcement in the local paper, but I did not have the courage to attend. I never sent it, but maybe now is the time you should read it. I took the envelope, feeling the weight of years of unspoken words in its thin paper. I should go. I have preparations to make for tomorrow. Ryan nodded. Thank you, Melissa. Not just for meeting me today, but for being someone Mom and Dad would be proud of. For becoming that person despite what Jack and I did. As I walked away, I could feel his eyes on me, much as I had felt Jack's after our first meeting. But this time what lingered was not just the weight of the past, but the faint, uncertain possibility of a future where old wounds, while never forgotten, might someday begin to heal. Back at my apartment, I found Jack sitting at the kitchen table, a half-eaten sandwich in front of him. His face was pale with anxiety about the treatment beginning tomorrow. How was it? He asked cautiously. Meeting Ryan. Informative, I replied, setting down my keys. He might come to your treatment session tomorrow. Jack's eyes widened. Really? He said that? I suggested it. Whether he shows up or not is up to him. Jack nodded, absorbing this information. And, how do you feel about that? The three of us in the same room after all these years. I considered the question seriously. I do not know, I admitted. 10 years ago, I would have said it was impossible, that I would never willingly be in the same room with both of you again. But now, I trailed off, searching for the right words. Now, Jack prompted gently. Now I am beginning to understand that people can make terrible mistakes, cause unforgivable pain, and still not be defined entirely by their worst actions. I said slowly. That does not mean I have forgotten or fully forgiven. It just means I am open to the possibility that there might be more to the story than I once believed. Jack's eyes filled with tears. That is more than I deserve, he said softly. Later that night, after Jack had gone to bed, I opened the envelope Ryan had given me. Inside was a letter dated May 15th, 5 years earlier, the day of my high school graduation. Dear Melissa, it began. Today you graduate high school and I am not there to see it. Add that to the long list of ways I have failed you as a brother. I saw your name in the paper listed among the honors students and felt a pride so sharp it was almost painful. You have succeeded despite us, not because of us. I want you to know that not a day goes by that I do not think of you. Wonder how you are. Wish I had made different choices. The truth, which I am finally willing to admit even to myself, is that I was afraid. Afraid of failing you, of not being the kind of guardian you deserved. So instead of trying and possibly failing, I chose not to try at all. It was the most cowardly choice I have ever made, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. Congratulations on your graduation. Wherever you go from here, know that someone is proud of you, even if I have no right to be. Your brother Ryan. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in its envelope. The words did not erase the years of abandonment, the birthdays and holidays spent alone, the milestones celebrated without family. But they did something else, something I had not expected. They began to fill in the human complexity behind the villain narrative I had constructed around my brothers. The next morning, as I helped Jack prepare for his first chemotherapy session, I found myself watching him with new eyes. Not just as the brother who had abandoned me, but as a flawed human being facing his own mortality, trying in his imperfect way to make amends for past wrongs. When we arrived at the hospital, Ryan was already there, sitting stiffly in the waiting room. Our eyes met, and he stood, uncertainty written across his features. "You came," Jack said, his voice a mixture of surprise and emotion. Ryan nodded. "Yes, I came." The three of us stood there in an awkward triangle, the weight of 10 years of separation hanging between us. Then hesitantly, Ryan extended his hand to Jack. "Let us get through today," he said, "and then we can figure out the rest." As I watched my brothers shake hands, something shifted within me. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the first step on a long and uncertain road toward healing. A road we would have to navigate together with all our scars and imperfections if we were ever to find our way back to the family we had once been, or forward to the family we might still become. 1 year after Jack's first chemotherapy session, we gathered in my newly purchased home for a small celebration. Jack's cancer was in remission. Ryan had helped him secure a position in the accounting department of a friend's company, and I had completed my residency and accepted a position at the hospital. The journey to this moment had been anything but smooth. There had been heated arguments, painful revelations, and moments when it seemed the fragile bridges we were building would collapse entirely. Jack's chemo had been brutal, with complications that extended his treatment and recovery. Ryan had struggled to balance his demanding career with his newfound commitment to family. And I had confronted depths of anger and resentment I had not fully acknowledged even to myself. But here we were, the three Walker siblings seated around a dining table that had once belonged to our parents, salvaged from storage and restored as a symbol of what we were trying to rebuild. "A toast," Ryan said, raising his glass. "To new beginnings." "And hard-earned wisdom," Jack added. I lifted my own glass, studying the faces of my brothers. Jack looked healthier than he had in a year, his hair growing back, color returned to his cheeks. Ryan seemed softer somehow, the sharp corporate edges worn away by months of weekly family dinners and difficult conversations. "To family," I said simply. "The one we lost, and the one we are creating." As we clinked glasses, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. The early days after Jack moved in had been tense and awkward, with boundaries constantly being negotiated and renegotiated. When Ryan began visiting regularly, first for Jack's treatments and later for family meetings, the dynamic grew even more complex. There had been a pivotal moment about 3 months into Jack's treatment when all the unspoken grievances finally erupted. It happened during a simple dinner at my apartment, triggered by a comment Ryan made about my cooking, reminding him of our mothers. "Do not," I said sharply, putting down my fork. "Do not talk about Mom as if we all share the same fond memories of family dinners. As if there was no 10-year gap where I had no family at all." "That is not fair, Melissa," Jack protested. "We have been trying to make amends. We have apologized over and over." "Apologized?" I laughed bitterly. "As if saying sorry erases what happened. Do you have any idea what it was like? Do you want to know what really happened at Evergreen?" They exchanged nervous glances, and I realized they had never truly wanted to know the details. It had been easier for them to imagine me in some sanitized version of foster care, well cared for, and merely inconvenienced rather than damaged. "I want you to tell us," Ryan said quietly. "All of it. We need to hear it." So I did. I told them about the bullying at school, the theft of my belongings at the center, the nights I cried myself to sleep. I told them about the time a staff member found me hiding in a storage closet during a panic attack, and about the Christmas I spent alone because everyone else had gone home to family visits. I described the shame of wearing donated clothes that never quite fit, of using the free lunch ticket in the cafeteria, of explaining to new teachers why my emergency contact was a social worker and not a parent. By the time I finished, all three of us were in tears. Jack had his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. Ryan sat rigid, tears streaming silently down his face. "I had no idea," Jack whispered. We convinced ourselves." "That is the point," I said, my voice hoarse from emotion. "You chose not to know. You chose not to see, because seeing would have meant acknowledging what you had done." That night marked a turning point. Having finally spoken my truth, having forced them to bear witness to the consequences of their choices, something shifted. The performative apologies gave way to genuine remorse. The theoretical understanding of their failure became concrete and specific. In the months that followed, we began the slow, painful process of rebuilding trust. There were setbacks like when Jack, in the depths of chemo-induced depression, lashed out and accused me of enjoying my role as the virtuous victim. Or when Ryan missed an important appointment because of work, triggering all my old fears of being a lower priority than career ambitions. But there were also moments of grace. Like the night Jack, unable to sleep due to treatment side effects, sat with me in the kitchen and told me stories about our parents I had been too young to remember. Or the day Ryan took a leave of absence from his firm to help during a particularly difficult phase of Jack's treatment, putting family first, perhaps for the first time in his adult life. Slowly, painfully, we were learning to be siblings again. Not with the innocent trust of childhood, but with the hard-won wisdom of adults who have caused and received deep wounds and chosen to heal together rather than apart. As our celebratory dinner wound down, Jack excused himself to take a call from his son, now living with him part-time, thanks to a revised custody agreement. Ryan began clearing the dishes, a domestic task that would have been unthinkable for him a year ago. I moved to the living room window, looking out at the garden I had started planting. Amanda had visited last weekend, helping me put in perennials that would return year after year. Hannah was coming next month, bringing her new fiancé to meet what she still cautiously referred to as your family situation. "Penny for your thoughts?" Ryan asked, joining me at the window. I smiled slightly. "Just thinking about where we were a year ago, about how much has changed. Do you ever regret it letting us back into your life?" I considered the question seriously. "Some days, yes," I admitted. "When the old pain resurfaces or when I remember something from those years at Evergreen. But most days, I am grateful for the chance to build something new. Not to reclaim what was lost, but to create something that honors the best parts of our shared past while acknowledging the reality of everything that happened." Ryan nodded thoughtfully. "You taught me something I never expected to learn, Melissa. That true strength is not in avoiding pain or running from difficult emotions, but in facing them directly and still choosing compassion." "I had good teachers," I replied. "Not you and Jack," I added with a small smile, "but people like Amanda and Hannah, people who showed me what unconditional support really looks like." Jack joined us, slipping his phone back in his pocket. "Michael says hi. He is excited about coming for the weekend." The mention of my nephew, with whom I was building a relationship after years of separation, brought a warm feeling. "The guest room is all ready for him. I found some books about space that I thought he might like." As we stood there together, three adults bound by blood and history and hard-earned reconciliation, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From the devastating loss of our parents, through the painful years of abandonment and resentment, to this moment of tentative peace. Family, I was learning, was not just about the bonds we are born with, but about the connections we choose to nurture and rebuild even after they have been broken. It was about the courage to confront painful truths, the humility to acknowledge profound mistakes, and the perseverance to create something new from the fragments of what was shattered. I had not fully forgiven my brothers for their abandonment. Perhaps I never would, at least not in the sense of erasing or forgetting what happened. But I had found something perhaps more valuable, the capacity to hold both the pain of the past and the possibility of the future without allowing either to define me completely. In the quiet moment of reflection, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. Not because everything was perfect, or because all wounds had healed, but because I had finally stopped letting my story be defined solely by what had been taken from me, and started embracing the fullness of all I had built for myself. The abandoned girl from Evergreen had become a doctor, a homeowner, a woman with the strength to set boundaries and the compassion to offer second chances. She had learned that family was not a given, but a choice made day after day in actions both large and small. And she had discovered that sometimes the most powerful act of self-liberation was not in holding on to justified anger, but in choosing a path forward that honored her own healing above all else. As the three of us stood together in comfortable silence, I realized that perhaps this was the most valuable lesson of all, that sometimes the family we rebuild can be stronger than the one we lost precisely because of the hard truths and painful growth required to create it. Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship that seemed beyond repair? What did it take for you to move forward? Share your experiences in the comments below, and do not forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories of family forgiveness and finding strength in unexpected places. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that healing is not a destination, but a path we choose to walk each day.